Firstly, thank you very much for the invitation, to Julian for the invitation to be able to present to this group of eminent journalists. It's a very much a pleasure for myself to be representing the Water Convention Secretariat. So my name is Rémi Kinna. I'm a legal officer with the Water Convention Secretariat. So the Water Convention being the Convention on the Protection and Use of Transboundary Watercourses and International Lakes, which we shorten to the Water Convention for short. So we're based in Geneva, in Switzerland. That's where our Secretariat is based, but it's a global convention. So we're working in all parts of the world, and we're seeing a very big interest and engagement within Africa. And that's also part of what I'm going to speak to you about today. My background is personally as an international water lawyer. So my background is in international environmental law with a focus on international water law. And I'm here today representing the Secretariat. The Secretary to the Water Convention sends her apologies. Her name is Sonia Koppel, and she is the Secretary to the Water Convention. Yes, I don't know whether there's anything else you'd like me to cover now before I go into my presentation.
That's good enough. We now know that we are a lawyer is the one speaking to us.
Exactly. And I'm also, we have within the Secretariat, I think this is relevant for the journalists present, we have particular focal points within the Secretariat for different regions of the world. And my particular regions for engagement with the convention are Southern Africa and Eastern Africa. So journalists from Uganda and Tanzania and Kenya fall definitely within the geographical remit of engagement with the convention that I'm responsible for. We also have another colleague who I know knows Julian and who has also done some work with Africa 21 is Komlan Sangbana. And he's also an international water lawyer from Togo. And he is in charge of Western and Central Africa. So between us, we cover the different regions of Africa as regards engagement with the convention.
Yeah, so thanks for that introduction. Are you going to run your own presentation from your end?
I can, yes, I've got a presentation here, so I can put it up on the screen.
Yeah, so then we are giving you co-hosting rights so that you can share your screen.
Okay, terrific. Share screen. So let me just put this into presentation mode. Can everybody see my screen? May take a little moment to.
Yeah, Rémi, you can go ahead.
Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yes, I do.
Okay, terrific. So again, thank you to Julian and everybody for the opportunity to present today. I realize that I'm coming in at the very end of your week-long course on water for journalists within Africa. So it's a privilege to come in right at the end and to hopefully add some further information and further value to what you've already heard from in terms of the other presenters that have presented over the course of the week. So my presentation will be split within 3 parts, but the overall arching focus will be on accelerating progress on transboundary water cooperation within Africa, a focus on SDG 6, on the UN Water Convention and the UN Water Conference. So as I said, the presentation will be split into 3 parts, and I will focus at the end of each part on what I do believe journalists can do to further the goal of transboundary water cooperation. So the first part is on measuring and accelerating progress on Sustainable Development Goal 6, which I'm sure you've heard about from some of the previous speakers, including a focus on transboundary water cooperation. The second part is on strengthening transboundary water cooperation. What is the role and the added value of the UN Water Convention, to which I work for the Secretariat. And the third part, which I think you've touched upon already as part of your week-long course, is the UN 2023 Water Conference, which is being held in New York in March, and what the road looks like beyond that. And I welcome questions and feedback from all of you at the end of the segment. So why are we talking about transboundary water? Well, importantly, 40% of the world's population lives in the 275 transboundary basins that cover almost half of the Earth's surface. So such a large part of fresh water that is available in the world is shared between 2 or more countries. And transboundary rivers specifically represent 60% of the world's freshwater flows. So it's very hard not to be engaged in transboundary water when you're talking about global freshwater resources. What do we then talk about in terms of the SDGs, and where does the SDG 6 in particular fit within all of this work on transboundary water? So obviously you have the Sustainable Development Goal 6 on clean water and sanitation, and underneath that there is a target. So the target 6.5 under SDG 6 is that by 2030 that we will be implementing integrated water resources management at all levels, including through transboundary cooperation as appropriate. So that's where we talk more specifically about transboundary aspect of water and achieving clean water and sanitation. Underneath that target, there are 2 indicators. One is 6.5.1 on the degree of integrated water resources management. And the other one, which I'll talk a bit more specifically about, is indicator 6.5.2. This is the proportion of transboundary basin area which has an operational arrangement for water cooperation. And I'll talk a bit more about what operational arrangement means in coming slides. The key takeaway here is that most of the world's water resources are shared, so cooperation is required to meet Sustainable Development Goal 6, and SDG 6.5.2 is the only indicator on transboundary cooperation, and this is important for other natural resources. And UNECE, which hosts the Secretariat for the Water Convention, and UNESCO are the co-custodians of that indicator. So as I said, specifically 6.5.2 measures transboundary water cooperation, and only 24 countries reported that all of the rivers, lakes and aquifers that they share with their neighbours are covered by an operational arrangement for cooperation. So clearly there's a lot of scope there for countries around the world to improve the coverage of agreements on transboundary water, and also the institutions that help to manage that transboundary water. Because when we talk about an operational arrangement, we're talking about the legal agreements between countries for management of that shared water, but also then the institutions that are formed by those agreements for helping to practically manage the shared water. So there's a lot of scope there for improvement. I wanted to talk briefly about the results of the last reporting on SDG indicator 6.5.2, which was the second reporting cycle in 2020. So this is the global representation of where we sit in terms of global coverage of transboundary arrangements, operational arrangements. There was a high level of engagement, which is crucial in the last round of reporting, but we're not on track to achieve this indicator. So only 24 countries reported. As I said in the last slide, at least 128 basins around the world report a lack of an agreement. And it's really crucial that basins have these type of arrangements in place to help manage their shared water. Another aspect that we're seeing, and it's also coming up from a lot of African countries that we speak to and engage with, is that there is insufficient knowledge on groundwater systems. So that's also something that we're seeing increasing requests for support on understanding transboundary water in terms of groundwater, and support then for agreements and arrangements to manage that groundwater. A key takeaway here is that progress must be accelerated to ensure that all transboundary basins are covered by operational arrangements by 2030. Now focus on Africa, and this is, I think, where the key aspects will be of interest to journalists from Africa. So there is a visual representation there of the results from the last reporting cycle. Actually, Africa is quite advanced, and African countries that share water are quite advanced in both their coverage in terms of legal agreements and institutional arrangements for managing shared water, but also in terms of their reporting under this indicator. So 43 out of 48 countries sharing water resources responded which was an increase from the first reporting cycle. There's an increased response rate, as I said, and an increased quality of responses, but more information is needed on aquifers. And this is also where we're going now into what I think journalists can help to cover in their coverage within countries relevant to transboundary water. So there are key areas that we need to strengthen for improved transboundary water management to achieve Sustainable Development Goal 6. We need to address data gaps because there has been generally a lack of data in that regard. We need to strengthen legal frameworks, and this is something that I'll speak about in my next segment on the Water Convention, but they offer a solid basis upon which to revise and negotiate new arrangements in terms of the global water conventions. We need to build political will. So the more that water and transboundary water is in the news, the more political attention it gets. So we need to build political will in terms of addressing these structural barriers and also finding innovative financing mechanisms to address the current financing shortfalls to meet integrated water resources management in countries. We need to leverage and mobilize expertise. And again, this is where journalists come in, because by speaking to water experts and bringing them on board, you'll be able to bring them into the achievement of SDG 6. And we also need to upscale capacity development, which is important for negotiating and implementing operational arrangements. So here's the key element of what I believe African journalists can do to help countries to further meet their requirements for SDG 6, but also specifically in relation to transboundary water cooperation. So I think the first thing I would say is to raise the profile. So there is the third reporting exercise for SDG 6.5.2, which is taking place between now and June of 2023. And we will be sending out invitations to ministries in all countries across the world, all UN member states, for reporting on SDG 6.5.2 as part of the integrated reporting exercises for the SDGs. This reporting exercise, it's important that governments know about it. It's important that governments are seeking to respond, to gather data and to work with their neighboring countries to provide this information, because the more data we have, the more progress we can make. So I think journalists can help raise that profile of the reporting exercise. The other aspect I would say is motivating officials through reporting on SDG progress, specifically on SDG 6, because by reporting on progress and motivating officials, we'll be able to motivate them to provide the data that is needed to assess the situation, but also to cooperate with other countries in terms of the shared water and share that data so that they can improve their transboundary water management and transboundary water cooperation. And by doing so, we build political support for accelerating progress on SDG 6 as regards transboundary water cooperation. So now I move on to the second part of my presentation, which is specifically focused on strengthening legal agreements for transboundary water cooperation. Yes.
Remy, there's a very nice line in the previous slide.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe just to put our thoughts together, why don't we finish this and then you go to the second part of your presentation?
Yes, sure.
Would you want? Yeah, I think that way it would be very nice. And you're just a genius. You had read my mind, or somebody had told me that had told you about me. Yeah.
I think we're on the same wavelength.
Oh, that's great. So you see, I think these two are very important, especially I like the last one, motivate officials through reporting on SDG 6. And if you make reference to what Tobias talked about on SDG 6, I think you just have a lot of fodder and content for your article. And so I think this is great for me. And I just wanted us to pause a little bit and think about these story ideas. I request all of you to pick this up. I'm sure that dry day, you might want to look at this slide again. Remember that we are going to send for you the slides, and there may be so many that you might not have time to actually flesh out what you want. So any question on what Rémi has already spoken about? Okay. Excellent, Remy. I'll add you 2 minutes. Now you have 7 more minutes to go to the second part of your presentation.
Terrific, thank you. So now we're going to narrow down on international legal frameworks for sharing transboundary water. So I'm a representative of the Secretariat of the 1992 Water Convention. And where does the Water Convention sit within the global framework for sharing water? So you can see there, it sits within a tiered structure of legal agreements. There's the global conventions, and they provide the key foundational obligations for sharing water between 2 or more countries. Then we go down to regional arrangements, which are more specific to different regions. So you would have heard from somebody on the SADC aspect, and there's the SADC revised protocol, which regards transboundary waters within the SADC region. There's also the EU Water Framework Directive and other such conventions at a regional basis, ECOWAS and ECAS. Then we go down to the basin level. There's the examples including the Congo Basin Agreement, Senegal River Water Charter, the Danube, the Zambezi. These are specifically for water basins and for river basins. There's also agreements underneath that, so sub-basin agreements that can also concern bilateral or multilateral relations for sharing water below the basin level. And then there's also at the national level. So I'm coming from the perspective of the global conventions. Why are these global conventions relevant and needed? These are instruments of preventative diplomacy and confidence building between riparian states. If you have these building blocks of legal obligations, you then have a basis for understanding how you are going to share water with your neighboring countries. They support transboundary water cooperation where it's not already established, so they can help to build confidence and build agreements where those agreements aren't already in place. They promote the gradual improvement of cooperation when it is established. They support but don't replace existing treaties, and that's key. So when you talk about these global conventions, they don't replace existing agreements such as the SADC Revised Protocol, Congo Basin Agreement. These agreements stay in place. The global conventions seek to address gaps and also strengthen specific clarifications on the existing arrangements. Also, that needs to be said here is that the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has called on countries and called on member states to join both of these global conventions and to strive for their full implementation. So this is coming from the highest levels of the UN and of global international practice. I'm going to talk specifically now about the Water Convention very briefly. What is it? It's a legal and institutional framework for transboundary water cooperation. It's a unique platform within the umbrella of the United Nations to discuss progress on transboundary water cooperation, and it's open to all interested countries. And I was interested to hear that of the representatives that you have in the room there, Tanzania has already expressed an interest to accede to the convention, and also Uganda has also expressed an interest to accede to the convention. So I can talk a bit more about that. The Water Convention, this is the structure, which I won't go into very much detail other than to say that we have a meeting of the parties, which meets every 3 years. We have a secretariat, which supports implementation of the program of work. And we have specific task forces, which focus on thematic areas to bring countries together to focus on those issues. Where do we sit in terms of accessions to the convention? So there are currently 47 parties. And what I would like to share here, which is of very much relevance to those in the room, is that since the Water Convention has been open for global accession, because it was started as a regional agreement for ECE countries, since it's been open to accession in 2016, we have seen 7 countries from Africa become the first countries outside of the ECE region. And as you can see on the map there, in the very middle of the map, the progress is very considerable within Africa, and we have parties including Chad and Senegal, Ghana, Guinea-Bissau, Togo, and now most recently Cameroon in November 2022 have become parties to the convention, and other countries which are very close in the final stages, such as the Gambia, Cote d'Ivoire, Namibia, Uganda, Zambia, and others. So there's going to be a continued momentum within Africa on accessions to the convention. Here's a very brief overview of the program of work areas, so the current program of work, and also the global activities under the convention. I won't spend long on this, but you'll get the slides afterwards, so you'll be able to review some of these program areas. Also, again, numerous resources under the convention, and I'll share a link to this particular page where you can find all of the different resources for your coverage of Transboundary Water Corporation in your own contexts. Here's some particular benefits on accession to the convention. And I won't go into detail on them other than to say that what we see is that accession to the convention brings multiple benefits to the countries that are acceding. One I would like to share is that there's recognition by the international community of a country's willingness to abide by certain obligations. And what we see is that countries are looking to fast track their accession process in order for it to be ready by the time of the UN Water Conference in March, so that they can then say on the global stage that they are a good global citizen when it comes to Transboundary Water Corporation as regards their accession to the convention. So that's one aspect that we see current African countries are highlighting their accession to the convention on the global stage. And also we see that this is a basis for financial assistance and donor cooperation. By becoming a party to the Water Convention and the 1997 Water Courses Convention, international financial institutions and donor agencies see this as a signal for improved possibilities for seeking funding for Transboundary Water Corporation projects. So we cooperate regularly with the World Bank, the African Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank. These are multilateral banks that we cooperate with, and they are also promoting accession to the conventions in regards to the fact that it lays a solid legal framework for encouraging investment. Here is a list of reasons why the Water Convention is beneficial for countries within Africa. Again, I won't go into detail, but this slide will be available as a resource after for your downloading and reading. Other than to say that we do cooperate with partners within the region. We have strong relationships with ECA, with AMCAL, with basin organisations such as the Nile Basin Initiative, the Zambezi Watercourse Commission, Lake Victoria Basin Commission, OCACOM, Orasacom. These are very much strong partners who engage very regularly with the convention and are actively promoting also that countries engage with the convention, because we have regular meetings that we would definitely love for further engagement and stronger engagement from African countries. Also to highlight here is that we have upcoming accession workshops and events that would be relevant to people within the room. We have recent national workshops in Nigeria and Tanzania, which were held last year. We also have upcoming workshops in Niger, Republic of Congo, potentially in Botswana, Burkina Faso, and South Sudan. And we also have some regional technical workshops, which also would be of interest to journalists on international water law and governance and water cooperation. Now we get to the slide again on what as a summary, we believe African journalists could do to further engagement with the convention. So I think here that news coverage to raise awareness about the importance of Transboundary Water Corporation is crucial, and also tying that into peace, sustainable development, and regional integration. Secondly, if a country in the region where you work is considering accession to the convention, we would recommend that you seek to engage and raise public awareness of and understanding of the benefits of accession to the convention. And finally, we would encourage you to encourage other journalists within your country to cover relevant events, workshops, and activities of the Water Convention. Here I will throw to questions from the participants in the room.
Okay. Any question? Any question? Yeah, but again, Rémi is very, very generous. He's bringing everything to the ground floor on some of these issues, so we better pick them up. Yeah, there's a question. Tobias? Is there any other question before Tobias asks his? Tobias, you may have to come here. It's the new ritual.
Hi, Rémi.
Hi, Tobias.
Hi, my name is Tobias, and I am the editor of The Water Diplomat, which was created by the Geneva Water Hub. Just a question. You mentioned the rapid, or let's say the high level of interest of African countries in acceding to the convention, and recently the interest of Uganda and Tanzania, amongst others. And I have heard also of interest of Nigeria to accede to the convention. So my question is actually whether you could go into more detail about Uganda, Tanzania, and Nigeria as to where they are in preparing the road for acceding to the convention.
Yes, thank you, Tobias. Thanks for the question. I can speak very in detail about those three countries, but I'll just give the highlights. So let me start with Uganda. So Uganda, Uganda has actually been engaged with the convention for quite some time. The water commissioner there, Calistinde Mugaya, is a regular feature in water convention meetings. He's also on the board of the IHP at UNESCO. So he's regularly engaged at this global level. He has been the focal point for leading the engagement with the water convention and the accession. We received a request for interest in accession to the convention in 2021, and we held a national workshop. So this is also an area where I believe the journalists are the best place to be involved, is these flagship events that we hold as national workshops. And at national workshops, we generally feature the Minister for Water in the relevant country, and we also feature the UN Resident Coordinator, other high-level representatives, basin organization representatives, and others. We held the national workshop for Uganda in February 2022. Since then, Uganda has progressed further along the process of the formal accession process, and it's now almost at the point of submitting to the cabinet for their review and approval. So that's where we sit with Uganda. They are hoping to accede very, very soon. In terms of Tanzania, so Tanzania.
Sorry to interrupt you, Rémi.
Yes.
But just in terms of, let's say, a scorecard of, or what can we say, a measurement index of where they are in the. I don't know exactly what that means, where they are now, in the kinds of different protocols that they have to go through before they finalize the accession.
So, a scorecard in terms of
are we 80% there? Are we 70% there? That's what I'm trying to assess.
Exactly. So I don't want to speak out of school and necessarily say something that maybe isn't as accurate as we can know about from internal national processes. But I would say for Uganda, they would sit somewhere between 60 to 70% of the way there, if not closer to 70%. But there's going to be also an opportunity there for further publishing of their progress. For Tanzania, Tanzania has just held their national workshop in December. So they now have to really start the formal process. So I would say Tanzania is probably closer to 30 to 40% of the way there, with the need to really kick in on this kind of stakeholder engagement process. For Nigeria, they have already received approval from the president. So I think Nigeria is actually at the 80 to 90% mark of the process. So Nigeria is actually extremely close. I can also say in terms of Namibia is, I would say, somewhere between 70 to 80% of the process as well. And again, these are rough guides from conversations that we've had with the countries, and please don't take it as a definitive marker, but I think it just gives you a bit of a gauge on where the process is at. But was there another country, Tobias, that you mentioned? I think I forgot.
No, those are the ones. So thank you very much, Rémi. I'll just say to you privately that Nigeria surprises me, but the other countries are quite logical in this framework. So my journalistic interest is drawn to Nigeria as to why they would want to do this. But at the same time, there's a lot of improvements that can be made in their in their water quality, for instance, in a transboundary setting. But thanks anyway for the answer.
No problem. Happy to share.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. So Rémi, I know you had 3 parts to your presentation. You still have the last one?
I do. I can raise it briefly. I just wanted to also understand, have previous presenters presented on the UN Water Conference in March already? Because I don't want to repeat what's already been said.
Yeah, it has been talked about extensively.
Okay. Well, then the third part of my presentation is really very brief. It's maybe just to note that Water for Cooperation is one of the 5 interactive dialogues. And we would encourage journalists to be involved in this particular area, because it's a nice way for journalists to involve multiple countries and talking about shared water management under that particular interactive dialogue. I won't go into any detail here because it's already probably been talked about, other than to say again, what do I believe African journalists can do in the context of the UN Water Convention? I think strong coverage of African countries participating in the conference is crucial. We definitely know that delegations are sending high-level representatives to this conference, and also countries within Africa are looking to promote their achievements and also to make voluntary commitments in regards to transboundary water cooperation. So we definitely know that there will be ministerial representation, sometimes head of state representation by African countries at the conference, and they will be actively discussing and promoting their achievements in transboundary water cooperation. So we would say strong coverage would be ideal of these African countries participating. And then also the second part, which I think is crucial for moving beyond the water conference, is for journalists to cover the commitments that are made by African countries, regional economic commissions and other regional bodies on accelerating progress to achieving SDG 6, because by reporting on countries' voluntary commitments, this increases visibility, accountability and motivation for political leaders to buy into accelerating progress on SDG 6.